Okay. Afternoon, everyone. I'm City Councilor Lydia Edwards, Chair of the Committee on Government Operations. It is Tuesday, October 19th, 2021, and we are here today for a virtual hearing on Docket 0638, Ordinance to create Boston Commemoration Commission, sponsored by Councilor Kenzie Bott. Referred to the committee on May 5th, 2021. In accordance with Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, modifying certain requirements of the open meeting law, we are having this hearing on Zoom. The public may watch this hearing via live stream at www.boston.gov/city-council-tv and on Xfinity 8, RCN-AT, Verizon 964. It will also be rebroadcasted at a later date. Written comments may be sent to the committee email at ccc.go@boston.gov, will be made part of the record and available to all councilors. The purpose of this proposal is to establish a Boston Commemoration Commission with the purpose of developing a plan to celebrate upcoming historical anniversaries of significance to Boston and to ensure that the celebration of such historical events are inclusive, historically accurate, and celebrates the diverse history of Boston. The proposal establishes the membership of the commission, authorizes the creation of subcommittees, and defines the responsibilities and authority of the commission. Joining us today on behalf of the administration are Roseanne Foley, Executive Director of the Boston Landmarks Commission, David Leonard, President of the Boston Public Library. We were also joined by Chief Mariama White-Hammond. And if I am forgetting anybody, David Leonard, President of the Boston Public Library. And if I am forgetting anybody else, Councilor Councilor Bach, please correct me. Also joining us today, we have from my colleagues, Councilor Braden, Councilor Flaherty, Councilor Bach, the lead sponsor, and Councilor Flynn. I'm seeing, sorry, my camera. And Councilor Flynn. So I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to the lead sponsor for opening remarks and then to my colleagues in order of arrival. And thank you very much. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Councilor Bach.
Thank you so much, Councilor Edwards, and thank you to everybody who's on the call today. This has been kind of an iterative conversation, and we didn't want to lose track of it because we are very much trying to get this commission established. So as folks know, in addition to being a counselor, I am a historian by training, and it's very important to me that the city of Boston embrace its history, but really embrace it in an inclusive way that tells all of our stories, that sort of doesn't leave us only with kind of settler colonists, just so stories, and that opens up the idea of like history to be conserved and retold and memorialized in all of Boston's neighborhoods. And my experience has been that when it comes to kind of doing really rich work on history, you need to bring a lot of stakeholders into the conversation, and that there are a lot of component pieces of this, right? So there's questions about our documentary history, what we preserve and highlight. There is questions about how we teach great local history curricula in the Boston Public Schools, what kind of sites we commemorate, how we protect historic buildings that again, might be of significance to Boston's Black community, its immigrant community, how we really foreground a space in our narratives and a voice for our Native and Indigenous communities in the telling of our history. And so I'm really excited about the idea that, as we move towards a couple of anniversaries that we know are going to be significantly celebrated, the 2026 250th of the country. I was trying to get the word sesquicentennial to catch on, but everybody tells me it's not going to, so I've accepted 250th. And then the 400th anniversary of the city of Boston. I think that, if we let those things sneak up on us, we'll do a few events and call it a day. But if we plan in advance, we have the opportunity to really do that kind of inclusive storytelling, to drive significant economic opportunities. We have a tourism industry and a world of folks who do try to preserve our historic sites that are really hurting after the economic impact of the COVID crisis. And I would just love for us to be the city in America that is doing the best job of kind of holistically grappling with its history and showcasing it, and have kids grow up in Boston not just telling us about the Freedom Trail, like, oh, they took me on those field trips, but really connecting themselves to the history of the place and the whole city. And so the goal here is really to launch a commission that could work on a few different fronts in kind of the lead up to that 250th and 400th. One piece is actually getting a group of people together to even like work on a timeline and think about, okay, there are 2 anniversaries, but like, what are the really resonant dates for our Indigenous community? What are the really resonant dates for our Black community? Like, let's not find out that it was in 2026, that it was 2024. There was something we should have really focused on and used as a touchstone. So one piece is kind of coming up with a timeline like that. Another piece is really looking at what we've got in the archives and thinking about, and at the library, how could we do something that's like exhibits in all our local libraries? How can we see local heritage trails? How do we make it so that the Boston Public Schools just have a best-in-class curricula on this? And that's sort of an educational component. And then there's the like, how do we update our tools? We've been talking in a lot of different spaces about the need for better Article 85 demolition delay stuff, about different landmarks definitions, working on that together. But I think that this kind of a pulling together of the threads gives us an opportunity to really make Boston one of the best cities in the country at preserving its built environment and telling that story. And then, like I said, I'm really interested in events and how we do like great events that drive attention and obviously tourism to the city, and kind of play to one of our strengths, because I do think that history is one of Boston's strengths and can be so in a really inclusive way if we focus on it. So if that all sounds to everybody like a kind of sprawling tapestry of things, that's because it is. And our goal in filing the commission legislation was to take a first stab at who should be in the room of this. Like, what are the different city agencies? What are the different stakeholder groups? Who are the kind of like historical experts that should have a seat at this table? And we feel like if we can kind of make the table wide enough and get all the right folks in the room and sort of establish, okay, here are a couple subcommittee threads that we would definitely have in this, then we can, turn the commission into something that has working committees that are effective at sort of chasing various ones of these things, because it can't all be one big conversation all the time. But the real purpose from my perspective of the hearing today is to make sure that we've got the right folks included in this. And so like my office, we took a stab at a list, but we want to hear from the city about, does this look like sort of the right groups to be included? Is there anybody else on the city department side? Is it still something you want to do? I think we got a lot of positive feedback on it last year, so we're hopeful folks are still in the hunt with us, because all these plans take many years to kind of really bring to fruition. And then, we've invited many of the advocates who are some of the people who have clamored for this, who have been the reason that we filed in the first place, but also new folks have heard about it along the way who might want to speak today to sort of who we should make sure is included at this table. So, Madam Chair, very much expect that we will be back for a working session. This isn't really the language working session. It's more the hearing to make sure all the right voices are coming in, and that then we can kind of do a little bit of retooling of language based on what we've heard today. That's really our objective. And with that, just looking forward to hearing from everybody. I know we opted this time because we did have a lot of stakeholders who wanted to speak, to invite folks to mainly speak in public testimony rather than organizing a whole bunch of panels. So for counselors' reference, that's sort of more how today will go. We had a lot of the stakeholders come and do panels and answer counselor questions at past hearings when we were kind of throwing this around conceptually. So that's the plan. Thanks, Madam Chair. Sorry to go on a little long.
No problem at all. Just wanted to announce a couple folks who've also joined us, including Councillor Matt O'Malley. And I failed to mention Lynn Smillage, Chair of the Landmarks Commission, and Kate Davis, Director of the Office of Tourism, Sports, and Entertainment are also here as well. So in order of arrival, we have after Councillor Bach, Councillor Flynn, Councillor Braden, Councillor Flaherty, and Councillor O'Malley.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Edwards, and thank you, Councilor Bach, for your leadership on this. I'll be very brief. I support what we're trying to do and trying to bring people together and tell the important history of Boston. But I also think this is an opportunity to celebrate our important immigrant roots in Boston that really have never, some of these stories that have never been told. But that's what I would be looking at. I know you obviously share that as well, Councilor Bach. And the other point I wanted to make is, during this difficult period in our city and country, let's use this as an opportunity to try to bring people together and unite people and unite neighborhoods and provide some hope and opportunity for people. And maybe this commission can be a pathway for young people to study history, to study the importance of our immigrant roots and what Boston really means to all of us. So thank you, Councilor Bach and Councilor Edwards, for this important hearing, and looking forward to hearing from residents across the city and administration officials as well. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Councilor Flynn. I'm just going to take over from Councilor Edwards. So I'm looking for the order right now, but Councilor Braden, you're on my screen, so I'm going to go to you next, and then Councilor O'Malley. And Councilor O'Malley, sorry if I reversed that. So Councilor Braden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really don't have anything to add to your very extensive introduction to this important issue. I really think you're right. You're very, very right and correct in thinking that this is something we should be working on. I feel that so often history is written by the winners, the victors, and I think in this moment, looking at a really inclusive history of our wonderful city, I'm really excited to explore opportunities with our local neighbourhoods and communities to look at immigrant history, as Councillor Flynn has referenced, but also to engage with our local history societies. I know we have the Alston Brighton Historical Society out here, Brighton and Alston Historical Society out here in Alston, but we have local history groups all across the city, and there's lots of resources that we can tap into to bring history to life and to really engage with our young people in our schools, etc., to make this a living and exciting process, so that they can place themselves in the span of history. So I really welcome this opportunity and hope that we can get it done and come out with something really wonderful at the end. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Councillor Braden. Council President Pro Tempore, Madam O'Malley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your leadership in this space. Proudly co-sponsored, excited to see what happens next as we get ready to mark the sesquicentennial as well as the 400th anniversary. I would echo the comments made by everyone thus far that it's important that we not only look through the lens of equity, but truly celebrate Boston's rich diversity and history as one. So this is an exciting topic, obviously, and this is an exciting commission, and I look forward to supporting it every way I can. So job well done all around, and thank you for your leadership on this.
Great, thank you so much, Councillor O'Malley. So yeah, and the one other thing that I think I neglected to mention is just to say that I think the other, sort of as like I said with the timeline, proactively thinking about a timeline and soliciting thoughts helps you make sure you don't miss things. Similarly, I think with Boston's built environment in that history, we've had a dynamic where you really need to have a lot of organization, resources, wherewithal in order to kind of even activate the tools that we have often for historic preservation. And so thinking about, is there a way that this commission could sort of launch some proactive citywide historic survey type stuff that sets us up to support everybody in all corners of the city in talking about the things that we want to celebrate and preserve. I think there's a real equity aspect to this, not just in the stories we tell, but also the way that we make resources available to everybody. I would love now to go to the administration. Maybe I'll start with, well, he unmuted, so I'm going to start with President of the Boston Public Library, David Leonard, and then I'll go to Chief Mariama White-Hammond and her cabinet, and then Kate Davis, unless you all tell me that you've organized yourself in a different order, in which case I'm fine with it. So,
Councillor, we nominated David to sort of represent the arts and culture and tourism piece of this. So, but I'm definitely here to answer any questions you might have.
Fantastic. David?
Thank you, Councillor, and Councillors, good to see you all in person. I think this is our second hearing on this topic, and I'm happy to once again reiterate the Boston Public Library's support to be part of this commission and this work ahead, particularly with the framework that the draft ordinance has before us. I'm also happy to represent that while I haven't talked to every single department that is nominated to be part of this commission, those that have are equally willing to be part of this as well. And so, I'm sure my colleagues who are here today will address the parts that are specific to their areas of interest. But this is an exciting opportunity, one that even though we may be in administrative transition, certainly will be prepared to support. There may be some work to do around the language and the specifics as we go forward, but the principles of being more organized around celebrating these great series of events. Some may be painful and some may be difficult, but nonetheless they are events to both mark and celebrate as we go forward, but to do so in a way that ensures that everyone who is part of Boston's history and Boston today can find voice in the events that we anticipate, I think is very, very important. And so I'm really here to basically endorse that this process go forward, and we look forward to ongoing conversations about the specifics and how to involve many members of the community. As we heard at the first hearing, there are many organizations that are already engaged in both advanced planning and thinking about these series of events. So in many ways, what this commission may do is simply give an additional framework and opportunity and forum for increased collaboration and coordination, particularly as it pertains to not just Boston's focus, but the state's focus as well. So I think while it's not meant to replace work that's already underway or add, it certainly provides a forum, and I think the net effect will be one that is additive. And I think we have certainly several departments who will both speak today and are represented here for questions about how some of the specifics may move forward. But certainly from the library's point of view and representing my colleagues, we are charged with both the preservation of history. Certainly that is true of the City Archives Department in addition in particular, but also in bringing that history to life and ensuring that where that history has gaps, that we fill in those gaps and that we continue to ensure that our understanding of history evolves. So I will end my opening comments at this point and pass to my colleagues.
Great, thank you so much, David. Reverend Mariama?
Yeah, no, I just want to echo what David said. I think this is a real opportunity. I think it's an opportunity to do something that can last beyond this. And I think I'm seeing things freezing. So I'm going to try to turn off my screen, see if that helps. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. It was getting a little choppy, but now we're good.
Okay, so I turned my screen off. The Wi-Fi at parks is not always stellar, but no, I just think it creates an opportunity for folks to actually start collaborating more, figuring out not just how we prepare for this particular event, but how we can be more integrated overall. So I think we're very supportive of this effort, and there are a number of sort of projects that are a part of the work that historic preservation is doing that could potentially really fit well into this, including in particular the work to really document and catalog all of our historic landmarks across the city, and really make that more publicly available and searchable and all sorts of things. So I'm excited for this opportunity, and I think it will really jumpstart some things that are already happening, and really excitingly invite more of the city into the conversation about historic preservation.
Great, thank you so much, Chief. And Lynn or Roseanne or both, do either of you want to say anything at this juncture?
Sure, thanks, Councillor Bach, and thank you for sponsoring this. Great idea. I think it's wonderful that we'll be joining other statewide organizations in preparing for these various commemorations. I do want to kind of follow up on the idea that it's not just the built environment, but we're also talking about underrepresented history, which means unwritten. And to that end, I'd like to invite one of my team, Joe Bagley, who is the city archaeologist, who I believe ought to be involved in this commission and in the process of formulating the commission to help bring archaeology into the, just kind of permeate the idea of archaeology throughout. Right now, he's only able to watch because he doesn't have a whatever link you need. So I don't know if there's a way to enable him to be able to speak or not.
Is he inside? Is he in the Zoom right now, or is he just watching on the live stream?
I think he's watching. I don't think he was able to get into the Zoom.
Okay, I'm sure we can solve that, and I strongly agree. I think that's a great suggestion.
And he can talk more fully about the various types of projects he has going on that will illuminate the 400th, for example, anniversary. And we also have a native quarry in Mattapan that is going to be our first landmark, fingers crossed, involving native peoples. So we have just some exciting work. So I think it would be really valuable to let him be part of the conversation. Let me see if he can log in.
Great. I just emailed the Zoom link. Hopefully, Christine, you can double check that it's the right one. So yeah, so Joe, we would love to have you join and speak on this.
And I'll give Lynn an opportunity to speak as well, chair of the Boston Landmarks Commission.
Well, I can start if we're waiting for Joe to connect. Thank you very much. This is marvelous. I can't wait to get started. I think I can say on behalf of the Landmarks Commission members that we're very grateful to have been invited to the table. And I'm particularly grateful that the three tools that we've had, the only tools we've really had, preservation tools for the last as long as I've been involved, upwards of 20 years. Article 85, the language around landmarking, and a citywide survey are in dire need of retooling and strengthening. And I really appreciate the fact that there's acute awareness of the need, because they're just not doing what they need to do. As far as that list is concerned, I was really impressed with the list of prospective members that you came up with. It's not in front of me, so I can't think quite who to add, although I definitely agree with Councillor Braden that the neighborhood, local historical societies and historical groups really should be part of this. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Lynn. I see that we've got Joe on, so I'm going to go to him now.
Thank you so much, Councillor Bach, for the invitation. And thank you, Roseanne, for the kind words about the work we're doing for the City Archaeology Program. But yes, I would be thrilled to participate in this committee if invited. We are working on several big projects, one of which we're going to start next month on an archaeological collection from Charlestown, the James Garrett site, the 1640 to 1650 site for in celebration of the 400th. It's a federal grant that we received for this to prepare for the 400 celebrations. It's an intersectional site with both European history and Native history represented on the site. And we've also been in discussion with the Park Service about commemorations and future potential archaeological surveys in Charlestown ahead of to do an inclusive archaeology of the Battle of Bunker Hill, including the many Native people of color and also women and children who were impacted by that day, that singular day in the community, both in the battle, but also the burning of the town itself. So very thrilled that this is happening and would be even more thrilled to participate. So thank you.
Wonderful. That's so exciting, Joe. I think it's exactly the kind of project we want to get going and that we want to bring attention to, right? And I know that as well, we'll hear from some of I don't know, Kate, I know you sort of said David would speak on your behalf, but if you want to say a word or two, obviously our goal is to do great things for the residents of Boston, but then also to invite other folks in.
Yes, and making the residents of Boston tourists in their own city. I'm sure there's many, many people that don't know all these unique histories with diverse experiences. So we're absolutely supportive of this. I'm really excited to work with all of these different people to create many events across the city. So
great, fantastic. I thought that maybe what I would do is just for a moment, I might share my screen and just show for folks who are watching at home the draft legislation. You can get this. Anybody can get this. It's up online. You can, if you can't find it, you can email Christine, CHRISTINE .O'Donnell, ODONNELL at boston.gov, and she can get you a copy. But I thought I would maybe just show it so that somebody who's watching at home could get a sense of who we sort of had currently proposed on the committee. I definitely would happily take the friendly amendment of adding the city archaeologist. So I'm can you guys see my screen right now? Yes, okay, great. So this is the filed ordinance. This is some of the statements about why we want to do this. And then when you get into the actual legislation, probably the important piece here, there's this 715.2, which is about, the types of folks who we would anticipate. I hear that I should zoom in on this. Is that better? Yes? Okay. Thank you. Shout out to my amazing policy staff, Emily Brown. Okay, so this was, when we were making a list, we sort of thought about how do we make this something that isn't just downtown, that isn't just places that already have historic districts, but then also includes those folks. And so we were thinking about tourism in and out of downtown. We were thinking about community archives. We were thinking about nonprofits that hold historical materials, folks in and outside of historic districts, Indigenous folks. I know we're going to hear from some people later. The Native American Indian Center of Boston's been a great partner to my office, and they really provide a lot of social services and are hubbed at the edge of District 8. But I know we have a lot of folks with expertise in Indigenous history, and it's such an important voice. And so thinking about, do we need more than one official member perhaps in that category? We'll wait to hear from folks. The Museum of African American History, another really important resource to the city, but thinking about that focus on local Black history as a key element, expertise in local Asian American Pacific Islander history, local European immigrant history, local Latinx history, local women's history, local LGBTQ history. I am an intellectual historian, and I think that, the history of ideas and social movements and how people are thinking about things is an important piece too. So definitely want that element in the mix. somebody from Boston's, I'll just say in that sort of list that we were just reading off, I know that both Councillor Braden and Councillor Flynn mentioned immigrant history, and although there's a bunch of different categories of immigrants included above, maybe we have that be another focus, or like an institution that does that. Thinking about the National Historic Park, including our federal partners, the Mass Historical Society is they are the entity that is housing right now the Rev 250 statewide kind of focus activities here, which to I think it was President Leonard's point, we definitely want to be partnering and not duplicating efforts. There's so much work to do that there's no need to duplicate efforts. So want to have them involved. The Boston Preservation Alliance that does so much on the built history of the city, Revolutionary Spaces, which I think really actually with some of their stuff around Crispus Attucks and the Boston Massacre commemorations have really kind of laid out an example of what this kind of work could look like. The Greater Boston Convention and Visitors Bureau, people who are hospitality workers, somebody from the State House to, again, help keep those. So that was kind of how we were thinking through it. And then on the city side, economic development, arts and culture, tourism is here with us today. BPS, I think curricular stuff is so important. And it's been really interesting for me to hear from so many people who were young during the bicentennial and who remember it, and it really shaped their sense of history in the city. And I think we have an opportunity to do that in an exciting and inclusive way here. City archivists, the BPL, Chief Mariama, the Landmarks Commission, both the executive director and the chair, somebody from the BPDA. I actually think I see in the attendees here, I'm going to promote you over Michael Canizzo, but obviously the Planning and Development Agencies has a big connection to sort of how the built environment of the city is stewarded in general. Potentially the collector or treasurer, because the Community Preservation Trust Fund really is the city's funding source for historic preservation projects, and the city councilor. So that was kind of how we were thinking about this commission. And then when you say, hey, 33 people, and now we're adding them as a lot of people to have in one committee room, that's where the kind of concept of subcommittees focused around particular things, events and trails, timelines, exhibits and curricula, legislation and preservation tools, and the idea of sort of assigning people to some of these specific designated subcommittees, and that we would create some real staffing capacity and take it on as a council to make sure that we were budgeting appropriately for this kind of pulling together work. And then this kind of just lays out a bunch of further detail about what the objectives of these different subcommittees would be and how frequent they would meet and stuff. This further detail I'm skimming through quickly because that's what I meant when I said that to Councillor Edwards, that we would get to all of that at a future working session. But I thought it might be helpful for me to just show that to people so that somebody watching at home could understand kind of who we're envisioning including. And so, yeah. I've heard already the city archaeologist and maybe an additional kind of focus on the immigrant history piece. I was wondering if my colleague, Councillor Braden, wanted to ask any questions.
I think it's a wonderfully rich tapestry, as you already mentioned. The immigrant history, when you talk to Councillor Edwards about East Boston, that we had our own sort of Ellis Island in East Boston that was sort of demolished and taken away. But, having done family history research here in Boston, the gateway, that this was a gateway for many immigrants from Europe to come into the United States, and many of them settled here, the Irish, the Polish, the Jewish. We have this massive range of different experiences. And then, the history of Deer Island and the native people buried out there, and it was a quarantine station during the Great Famine when people came from Ireland. There's so many different aspects of this, and the maritime history of Boston as a significant port, and also geographically how the actual shape of the city has changed with landfill and filling the Back Bay and the South Bay. And it's basically more landfill I think, and then putting that in the context of climate change going forward, this moment in time, what can we learn from the past that will inform our future? So I think there's a lot of potential here to really dig in and have a very exciting process.
Great. Thank you so much, Councillor Braden. Michael, do you mind just saying a word, just since I think you're the BPDA person here, maybe about the way that the BPDA interacts today on the historic preservation piece? I know that Article 85 is it's an article of our zoning code, which is sort of something that the BPDA staff help hold custody of. I don't know, Michael, if you would mind just saying a few words. I may have lost you. He was there. We saw him. David, go ahead.
I just wanted to add a comment, part question. I'm sure there will be other organizations that get uncovered in the process of thinking about this work and beginning this work. And in my experience, some may be desirable to add as formal members of the commission. Others may be invited to participate in working groups, because I do believe the whole city can get behind this, and there's no shortage of work to do. And just because someone's name isn't on the actual commission list, it can end up there later, or certainly can be an important subject matter expert that gets invited to participate. So that's just a comment, and see if you or your colleagues have thoughts on how you envision this going forward. And I take your point that the wordsmithing is not for today, because I think there are some timelines that are in the draft ordinance that probably need a little more thinking through.
Great, so noted. Yes, and we will happily work on those. And yeah, I agree with you. I think for sure we won't be able to codify in the law everybody who should be involved in these conversations, but we should. And we should set it up such that there is that openness for folks being able to be part of the working group in a particular area. Also because the vision of this is something that, my hope is gets us going very early in the next calendar year on a timeline towards 2026, 2030. Starting early is great, as you know, for planning exhibits, et cetera. But also, of course, actors are going to change, and organizations that aren't in the loop today will get into the loop in a couple of years. And so I agree with you. We can't set anything up here in a way that kind of closes down the options for participation. Michael, I see you back with us. Do you mind just saying a few words? I just, so that for somebody watching at home who thinks, what's the connection to the Planning and Development Agency in this conversation? Just a sense of where do you come from on that?
And I'm sorry, I had to jump off for a second. Just as I was asked to jump into another meeting this morning, you call on me, so I apologize for the disruption. The reason why the BPDA is involved, Article 85, which is the demolition delay ordinance, is part of the zoning code. So that is part of our responsibility, is to draft the zoning amendments or code. So we are working closely with the Landmarks Commission on updating and revising, and I'll say trying to strengthen the Article 85. And I know we're getting close to a draft that should be able to be distributed for, I'm assuming, the first round of comments from the community. Also, there are a number of folks that work in the BPDA that have had their starts of their careers down at the Environment Department, and specifically with the Landmarks Commission. So there's a number of us that have a very strong interest in how the commission works and how we preserve the buildings in Boston. So I think that's another strong piece that the BPDA brings, is our experience working with the commission, our experience working in historic preservation. And I think the commitment to to improve the process that we engage in review and making sure that we do not unnecessarily take down historic buildings. So that's sort of our reason why I see us being a participant in this committee.
Great, thank you so much, Michael. Yeah, and I strongly agree. I think you guys have a key role to play, and I really appreciate that work is underway on Article 85. And I think looking forward to getting to see that and having further conversation about how to overhaul those things. I think that's the thing about the reason we do commissions and such is just to pull all these threads together and have people see like, oh, the thing that's happening over in this silo could really help with this thing we're working on in this other silo. And it's great to have so many departments that focus on their area and do such a great job at it, but sometimes you need a little bit of cross-cutting work, and so that's definitely the objective here. I have a hand raised from someone who I think has a city ID, so I'm gonna chance it and promote them over, or am I? Did that work?
Yep. Counselor, they are over. I don't know who it is though.
Yeah, if you just came over to panelists, 050884. Who's that?
Yeah, this is. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, hi. This is John McCarthy from the archives.
Oh, wonderful. Welcome, John.
How you doing? Yeah, we're really excited to be part of this endeavor, and some of our activities indeed relate to some of the aspirations of what the commission is going to do. At the City Archives, we've been collaborating with other archives and local universities on projects to document school integration and urban renewal in Boston. We've also worked with English High and with history faculty at Boston Public Schools to bring local history primary sources into the classroom. And we're looking forward to continuing these collaborations on this commission. And we especially look forward to collaborating with our colleagues in Boston Public Schools to empower our city's young people to learn more about their local history.
Great, thank you so much. And I think it's amazing to, the archives hold so much that people don't even know it all about, and think about how we can use that and your guys' expertise. And I mean, even all of the materials you have on how Boston marked the 300th, and the ways in which we can do it one better in the 400th. And I think we're really definitely looking forward to having you involved, John.
Yeah, and we would not only be, I think, useful in the historical projects, but also on the preservation side. We may note that we've got the building plans, the building permit plans from the Inspection Services Department going back to the late 19th century. This is a huge collection, and it documents the buildings, what the buildings look like, how they were designed, and this is an extremely historical collection, 150,000 sets, and we've had this for a couple of years, transferred from the library, who preserved and protected it for many decades, and so we're processing this, indexing it, and scanning as we go along, and this is something that I think could be useful for the preservation aspect of the commission's work.
Great, wonderful, thanks so much. So I think those are all the city folks we have, and we've got some folks who are waiting to testify on the public side, so I'm going to move to that in a moment. Except that I do see Kristen Lafferty. Kristen, you're with the city, aren't you? Sorry, I'm just going to promote Kristen over because I want to. or Carrie, if you can.
Kristen doesn't have a microphone.
Okay, but is she with you?
Yeah,
Oh, okay, all right. So she's all set. She doesn't need to testify?
right. She's okay. She's fine. Yeah.
Okay, great. All right. Thank you so much. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure. So I guess the thing I would ask city folks is just, I think our chair is really deservedly fierce about the idea that when we have our working sessions, we should show up kind of ready to work on the legislation. So what I and my office will just ask of everybody in advance of the next working session that we have, which we haven't scheduled yet, but I imagine we will do in the sort of later part of November, early December, is just for folks to kind of have somebody in the department go through the actual draft language and think about what are the changes and additions. I know that David flagged maybe some timeline things. We've heard today the city archivist thing, but just whatever we can get in terms of red lines from everybody, that'll help us have an efficient working session, again, hopefully sometime in November. But thank you all. Thanks for being available today.
Sandra, can I ask a question?
Yes.
What is the process by which the mayoral appointments will be made? You know, what's going to happen to enable to define these people and the right persons for the various for the various objectives?
Yeah. So that's a great thing for us to really talk through at the next working session, because what we currently have proposed, John, is that there will be a series of members appointed by the mayor with approval of the city council. And that's really sort of those first 20 people who I was referring to before. And then there's a set of kind of another 10 people who are ex officio, who come by virtue of their title. So like you, for instance, as a city archivist. And so for the virtue of the title people, it's easy because it just changes, as necessary if the title holder changes. But I think, with the other appointees, our goal in having it be appointed by the mayor with approval from the council is this is obviously aimed to be a kind of consensus-driven process. We're not aiming for something contentious or sort of between the two branches like here. But I think we'll all need to put our heads together about whether that's the best mechanism and whether we should build a nomination mechanism into it or something. I don't know. But it's a good flag for us to discuss at the working session.
So the search for these people will take place at the next working session, or the work to begin the search for them will take place at the next working session?
Well, I think the next working session will be about who we should include formally in the legislation, which is more about the description of categories than a specific person. I think that some of these are ones where we would leave it up to the organization to submit their nominee. Some of them are we might if we're looking for a voice of somebody who's focus on local women's history, that might be more of a kind of open call situation. So I think we need to think through that, and it's something we should talk about at the next working session.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. No, that's really helpful. And now I think, again, with gratitude for the city folks, the many city folks for being on this today, I do want to move into public testimony and hearing from folks who are, involved in all aspects of this work and interested in the ways in which we might tweak this and make sure the right voices are in the room and the right things are being highlighted. So I'm just going to my list here. I see, I think I've got Allison Frazee from the Boston Preservation Alliance, and then go to Nat next, and then I see I've got Jean and Thomas. So yeah, Allison, why don't you kick us off?
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Allison Frazee, Assistant Director at the Boston Preservation Alliance. And I'm happy to provide a couple of brief comments today. So with this commission, we have the opportunity and the responsibility to not only ensure that these upcoming commemorations and celebrations are more inclusive of all of Boston's history, but to create new, more appropriate tools for historic preservation for generations to come, ensuring that the progress we've made to uncover lost stories and empower quieted voices will continue into the future and better influence the decisions that are made about Boston's built heritage moving forward. So for me, it's not just this moment in time, it's how are we influencing all decisions that get made into the future. The Alliance would be happy to have a dedicated seat on the commission, and we appreciate the diverse perspectives included on this list. We strongly support this effort and thank Councillor Bach and others who have worked so hard on this. I did have one question, which I think we'll sort of tackle in the working sessions coming up, but just to flag it for people to think about, I wondered how public the subcommittee conversations would be. Would the public be invited to those? Would they be recorded or minutes made available to the public? I think it's important that we balance transparency for these subcommittee conversations with the ability for them to be agile and really have candid conversations. So something to maybe talk about in a later session. Thanks.
Thank you, Allison, so much. No, and that's a great point. When we had written it, we had been thinking of that balance. And so we did constitute it in a way that I think wouldn't make the subcommittees automatically subject in all their deliberations to open meeting law. But I think like, it seems to me like with practically all of these subcommittees, you're going to have some distinction between wanting to have public meetings that are an opportunity to talk to the public, to have the public hear what the committee's thinking about, like, et cetera. You know, there is probably going to be an appropriate time for that in all these conversations. And then also, like you say, to be able to have different stakeholders get to know each other and kind of talk about, look, this is the angle I was thinking. And not all of those necessarily need the formality of something like today's occasion, right? Where we're all on Zoom streaming together. So yeah, I think that's a good flag and something. And I would appreciate anybody who's testifying, if you have a question like that, even if you think it might be for the working session, the hearing is a great time to put those questions, comments, suggestions on the record, just so that we can then go to the working session kind of prepared to address them. So really appreciate that, and appreciate Allison, all your work on behalf of the Preservation Alliance. Next up is Nat from Revolutionary Spaces.
Thanks so much, Councillor Bach, and thanks for the opportunity to speak to all of you today. So our organization cares for the Old State House and Old South Meeting House, and our mission is to bring people together in those spaces to explore our nation's unfinished struggle to create and sustain a free society. So, that's the frame that we bring to the opportunity that's ahead of us in these upcoming commemorations. I'm really grateful that the example of our recent work around the anniversary of the Boston Massacre is recognized in the draft ordinance, and we are obviously eager to be engaged in these conversations moving forward in whatever way is supportive of the city's effort. I just wanted to underscore why I'm so supportive of this effort. I think that there is a really significant opportunity here. There is an opportunity to bring visitors to Boston in great numbers, just like the bicentennial did. That's fantastic for heritage tourism and the business that drives in the city. Hopefully we can bring the lens of equity to heritage tourism and the benefits it brings to the city in this cycle of commemorations. But more importantly, we have an incredible opportunity to engage not only those visitors, but our entire city in a dialogue about what it means, what it really means to say we all are we the people. And the way that we've approached the story of the nation's founding is really to say it's an unfinished conversation, right? So here in Boston 250 years ago, some of our nation's most fundamental questions took shape. And we're still grappling with those questions. So we have an opportunity to use these anniversaries as a platform for dialogue, not about the past, but about what our values are and what justice and equity looks like for this generation and for the future of the city. So I think, it's not a moment too soon to lean in and think together about how to do that in a way that's going to make us proud and move the city forward at a really critical moment. And then the third piece of the opportunity is that we really do have a chance to leave a legacy. I think we can all look back at the bicentennial and say there were really critical investments made in our historic infrastructure that have left a lasting mark on the city, have changed the way the world sees Boston, have continued to be a benefit to the city. What are those investments that we want to make for today? And what does that legacy look like for the next 50 years? That's really what we should be thinking about. An improved infrastructure for inclusive storytelling, infrastructure for building a welcoming experience for all. That's what this opportunity represents. So we're really excited to be part of that conversation. And the 250th anniversary of the Tea Party is just around the corner in 2023. And so our organization is already thinking about how to do that in a way that feels right for the current moment. So to maximize the opportunity, I think what we need is greater coordination. We've got lots of organizations that can contribute something, and lots of neighborhoods that can contribute something to this, but we do need coordination. So this commission, I think, can be really helpful in that way. I think it bears saying out loud that we also need resources. I mean, unfortunately, many of the nonprofit organizations that are vital partners for this undertaking have really been laid low by the pandemic. And so we're scrambling to get our heads above water. So I think, we just need to be mindful of how we can bring resources to bear in a way that will allow us to maximize the opportunity ahead of us in a very short period of time. So I think that's what I've got to say to this fantastic group. And so looking forward to continuing the conversation. I had just two thoughts on the commission's membership. And would it be okay for me to just say?
Yeah, please do.
Okay. So number one, I'm really glad to see Boston National Historical Park called out in here. They are doing fantastic work. I just launched a series of programs, virtual engagement series that is really aligned with what's laid out here, called Unfinished America at 250. But it's not just Boston National Historical Park, it's also Boston African American Heritage Site and Boston Harbor Islands National Recreation. I forget what the title is, but the administrative unit that is relevant is the National Parks of Boston. They've all sort of been unified under that one umbrella. So we probably want to make sure that we're reflecting that in the ordinance language. And then the other thing that I was going to say was the membership has been thoughtfully, so we've thought carefully about how to engage folks involved in the business side of heritage tourism, and I think that's entirely appropriate. But I would think that it might be appropriate to include voices from the wider business community in Boston, not just heritage tourism. So it might make sense to try to engage the Chamber of Commerce or BECMA or some other organizations that might be able to bring the wider business community to the table. I hate to get into the Boston and Philadelphia comparisons, but if you look at the Philadelphia 250th Commission, they have, major leaders of industry in that city are sitting at the table with representatives of the city and thinking about how to leverage it for the benefit of Philadelphia. And we should be doing something similar here in Boston. Thanks so much for the opportunity to speak.
Great. Thank you so much, Nat, for those suggestions and for all your work. Next up, Jean Foster, I was so pleased to meet recently. It was a very powerful moment on the Friday before Indigenous Peoples Day. The Harbor Club of Boston, which is in my district, raised a Massachusetts flag, so a flag of the Massachusetts people, over its building in the Back Bay on Comm Ave. I had the opportunity to meet Jean and was just thinking about what a powerful symbol that was, and also sort of what it says about how far we have to go. That, I'm 32 and I've lived in that zip code like my whole life, and it's the first time I'm seeing that flag. And just thinking about the way in which our Native and Indigenous community has not been included in this storytelling historically, or has been pigeonholed into a very specific kind of part in that story. Jean is also a longtime Boston Public Schools teacher. And so I think on this curricular element, that's really important to me too. And so I'm just really glad for a number of reasons to have her here with us today, and grateful that she has made time to come be with us. So Jean, you have the floor. You have to unmute.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. At this time, though, I'd like to defer a little to the president of our tribal council, the Massachusetts Tribal Council, to give him voice before I speak, if that's all right with you.
Absolutely, that'd be great. So let me recognize this.
So Thomas Green is our vice president of our tribal council, and he is one of our the chairperson of our history committee, a very solid historian, and he brings a lot of information to the whole tribe. It's that they've done for the past 20 years at least of deep and detailed research from the Massachusetts archives. So I'm going to defer to Thomas, and if you don't mind, and then I'll speak afterwards.
Perfect. Thomas, please, you have the floor. You're muted. There we go.
Thank you, both Jean and Councilor Bach, and thank you everybody for having me here. I'll be fast. I would just like to add to this endeavor by bringing to light the history of the enduring Massachusetts tribe in Totant, or what is now known as Boston. I'd like to bring to light the procession of Indigenous leadership from the Massachusetts tribe that has successfully led our people from, prior to colonization to this day. We are, still led by Sachem of the Blood. And, just like you were saying, too many people don't know about the Massachusetts. I'd also like to bring to light some of the historically important events that, revolve around, members of our tribe. As well as other Indigenous groups in Massachusetts who've been marginalized and don't really have a voice and have been, passed over when it comes to the history of this place. A lot of the Indigenous bands, I happen to personally be descended from the Neponset band of the Massachusetts tribe at Ponkapog. But there were a lot of bands in the Massachusetts prior to colonization that have just been either wiped out or assimilated into other bands and tribes due to displacement with colonization. And I just like to bring to light some of that history, some of the history of the original Indigenous peoples of Boston that I never learned about. I grew up in Brockton. I never learned anything about my people in history. I never learned much about any of the Indigenous people of the Commonwealth growing up in Massachusetts. And it needs to be brought to light. And I'd like to be the person on this commission that assists in doing that while we're commemorating, the fine city of Boston. Let's keep in mind that there were Indigenous people here prior to colonization that are still here. And I just want, that's something that I feel is important for people to know, not just the people that were here, but the people that still are, that still persist as the Massachusetts tribe today. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Thomas. We so appreciate you making the time to be here with us today and for that important witness, and hope that yours will be a voice that continues in this as we sort of get it rolling. Jean?
Yes, am I unmuted? Okay, so thank you, Thomas. I'm just really want to reiterate the history being omitted. As I was a teacher for 30 years in Boston, teaching at the elementary level, and I did teach in grades 2, 3, and 5 throughout my career. And I know that those are the grades where Native American history are taught. The Massachusetts frameworks specifically teaches only about the Wampanoag. tribe. And a lot of the Wampanoag educators and leaders have been developed curriculums that I've used myself as a teacher to educate my students in my schools, because nowhere in any of the schools that I've taught or been in Boston did anyone know there really was a Massachusetts tribe. And that's taken a my whole career to bring that to light. And each of the tribal members who are on our council have had that everywhere we go. People are not aware that there even is a Massachusetts tribe. So I am very supportive of your commission, and I am grateful because you are giving a voice in this commission to the Native people and every other culture that is not mentioned, which is a lot of our cultures. The ones you mentioned in the proposal have all been marginalized to a point in favor of the European story of colonization. So there are two committees that we are very interested in that were in your proposal. One is the Events and Trails Committee, because we have been recognized in recent years, the recent 3 to 5 years. And actually the first community of Boston was Brighton that created a mural. They commissioned a mural under a train bridge, a large train bridge. And we, members of our tribe, were the models for that in 2004. That's the very first time our tribe was even recognized as the people of the Boston area, Boston and surrounding areas. That's in Brighton at the Brook Street underpass where the traffic circle is. And we have since, there have been different markings, official markings placed in Boston, but no one would know that. And this commission could perhaps allow us to establish a Native trail, the Massachusetts Trail, the Massachusetts Tribal Trail in Boston, and include a lot of these places where we have in Quincy. There's a couple of places in Quincy, Canton. The town of Canton was Ponkapog. The entire town of Canton was the 6,000 acres of Ponkapog, where the Neponset tribe band of us, where our ancestors were moved. So there's a lot that we could do to help with that. The second committee that we're very interested in is the Timelines, Exhibits, and Curricula Committee. On our website, we have an extensive timeline dating back from 1646 when Reverend John Eliot was preaching Christianity to the natives until 1869 when the Commonwealth of Massachusetts passed a law called the Act of Enfranchisement, which made all Native American citizens in the Commonwealth. And by doing that, terminated Indian tribes as a concept. And so there's a lot we'd like to be able to be a part of that. For me, the curriculum is a very important part for me because in the Massachusetts frameworks, only the Wampanoag tribe are required to be learned about. And of course, there are at least 3 or 4 tribes in the Boston area, including the Massachusetts tribe, who contribute to the whole Native community, but, including the Nipmucks. They are very involved, very active. They were federally recognized for a short amount of time until a presidential election took place, at which time that status was reversed. Political reasons, nothing more. But I really want to see our leaders, our SACMs, our historical events of the Massachusetts tribe included in the curriculums that are being taught, especially in grades 2 and 3 in the Boston public schools. So those are some reasons right there. And I hope that, that you have success with having enough votes for this commission to take place. And we will participate in helping with those 2 committees at least when that happens. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you so much, Jean, and Thomas, again, really, thank you for being part of this. And yes, I also hope for success here. And then we'll just be at the starting line, right, on really making progress on all these things. So I think with that, I'm gonna double check and make sure that we're not, I know there's at least one person who was gonna join us for public testimony who may have to come to the next working session instead. I'm just gonna double check. Christine, you don't have anybody else signed up right now, right?
Hi, Counselor, I do not.
Okay. All right, well, I think in the interest of everybody's time, we'll probably ask that person to come along to our next session, since we know that we will have one. Again, for the administrative folks, my office will be following up just for kind of those red lines and making sure that when we have a working session, we're able to just jump right in to the language. I think I'm very encouraged by the fact that I feel like there continues to be really strong support for doing this across the city departments. And I do feel that there's strong support on the council amongst colleagues. So I think it's just a question of crossing the T's and dotting the I's and getting ourselves together to that starting line. And it's actually, like, you know, the timelines we're talking about will catch up on us fast. And as Jean just so eloquently described, there are many important occasions and commemorations that have yet to be unearthed. And I think that's one of the first orders of business for this. So we want to move thoughtfully but swiftly in getting it kind of going. So I think with that, I'm looking for my gavel, which I've lost somewhere on my desk. But I think with that, thanking everybody for their time today. I will be making a report back to the chair, Councillor Edwards, and we'll be retaining this in committee. But this hearing of the Boston City Council's Committee on Government Operations is adjourned. Thank you all.